You guys ready for the one-shot arena? Apply vulnerability. Boom. 172 mil. Jeez. No, the best part about this, you wouldn't believe it if I didn't tell you. I actually have a level 1. Look at this. My clip is level 1 for my bonus on the damage with mace. Alrighty guys, let's go over the best Barbarian HOTA build in the game for non-overpowered. Well, I want to go ahead and say, yeah, you can get great numbers with overpower and you can print it out and share it with your mom on the refrigerator. Realistic DPS is much better because you're going to be able to hit more consistently and you don't have to do the whole wait 12 seconds then you go for your attack, or every 6th attack on the 7th one then you get to do big damage. I built this to be more realistic for people that actually want to clear Sigil 100s as well as the Abittor of Zir. And a lot of you guys were like, dude, I like your Barbarian build so much better now that I swapped to it. Can you update me on what you've changed? Because I was still leveling up and I was doing a lot of experiments. And I found out that you don't actually really need to scale overpower. Yes, again, you can one-shot bosses with overpower, and if you want to swap the Banished Sword's Talisman, most of the time you can still one-shot majority of the things that exist in the current iteration of the game. Now, instead of just stacking overpower damage, I would rather stack more survivability as well as more consistency with what you can do in the build. I'm talking about activating your berserking because that's a huge source of additional damage. So that's where my build differs, and that's what I'm bringing to the table with this newer Barbarian build, because every single HOTA build that you look up, it will almost always say overpower, you want to stack as much as possible. And while that is good, again, if you do want to reach those thresholds of just high numbers, sure, for that one hit, but over the course of time it's going to be much more effective for you to get other sources of damage if you want to actually do longer streams of DPS versus a one hit every X amount of seconds. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense here. So starting off, let's go over the skills for the build. So we are running Lunging Strike and Hammer of the Ancients, 3 shouts: Rallying Cry, War Cry, Challenging Shout, and then Wrath Berserker. This is kind of like the bread and butter of every single Barbarian build. But as far as what we're doing with the skills, we are actually doing something a little bit different too with how we use our primary skill. So our generator, or our basic skill, is Lunging Strike. This actually has a little bit of a boost to it, so it doesn't really lower your DPS that much when you initiate with it. What you'd want to do is initiate with the Lunging Strike. That's going to proc Hemomancy, making everything vulnerable, and then your HOTA will just one-shot most of the things anyways, versus some of the overpower builds, well, you have to kind of build it up, and you might need to swing multiple times. So that's where this build can differ. Now, if you want to just spam HOTA, I mean, you could definitely spam HOTA. It's no problem at all with this build. And Hemomancy is just great for clearing up the trash. And then activate your shouts once things go wrong, or if there is an elite pack, or if there's a boss at the very end, yeah, just activate all of your skills. I prefer the Diablo 3 and Diablo 2 playstyle of activating your shouts, where you activate it and then you can kind of forget it for a few minutes. But the Diablo 4 playstyle of running Martial, Disembowel, where you just have to keep on pianoing, hitting your shouts all the time, I didn't really enjoy that. So if you do want to play that, you can do that as well. I've made some suggestions here in some of the notes. But as far as our skills goes, that's going to be pretty much like the standard bread and butter. Now here's where it differs a little bit as well. So the technique that we run is Two-Handed Sword. Majority of Barbarian builds will be running the Axe. Now the Axe does do more damage, but the bleed proc is actually quite nice for not only survivability, but the Two-Handed Sword will allow you to actually have the enemies bleed versus having to activate Thorns to do the bleed damage to the enemies, therefore then getting the bonus off of one of the legendary nodes in the game that allows you to actually get your berserking. So it's more consistent, and consistency is definitely key if you are looking to do what I would consider more real content versus, again, just taking a screenshot of a very high number, which is kind of what I want to say a lot of people have been doing with HOTA, and they're like, dude, I can hit for billions of damage. There's no need to hit for that much. You should probably look into, maxing out your resistances, getting stats that actually would matter, with the exception of maybe if you're doing Abittor of Zir on the highest Sigil tier, maybe at the 25 mark. At that point, maybe that's what you have to do in order to finish it within the time frame, but that content doesn't exist, and I wanted to bring you guys this gameplay and build guide before, of course, that new stuff comes out, so you can go ahead and have it ready. But next up, as far as equipment goes, we're running the Harlequin Crest. You can run the Tusk Helm if you want to instead. Totally fine. Now here's where it gets a little bit optional.
I really like activating Hemomancy, activating Vulnerability before I activate my HOTA, so I like running Aspect of Might here. You can also run the Aspect of Disobedience in your chest piece, and then for your amulet, you can run the Banished Lord's Talisman, which I do kind of like to run sometimes when it's just at the boss. If it is a boss and I want to one-shot it, HOTA is so fast anyways. The difference between like one-shotting it and maybe needing to activate a few HOTAs between like 1 second and a 3-second time to kill, does it really matter in the long run of the dungeon? Not too much, and being able to move around faster, getting a bunch of stats that actually matter like total armor, getting damage reduction, those are usually just going to be overall much better, but feel free to go ahead and mix and match. There's lots of different suggestions in the notes. But yeah, Aspect of Disobedience or Might can be good here. Again, I like this playstyle of just literally Lightning Strike once, it Hemomancies everything, everything's already vulnerable for you to go in and slam with the hammer. And then next up, we are running the Edge Masters here, so more damage based off of your resource. And you can see this build, especially in the open world, we already did Sigil 100, but in the open world, I love Hemomancy and just having all of the bonuses, especially with Berserking. I mean, you can just delete content here. It's so great for doing everything in the game. And then, as far as the gloves go, we want Hammer of the Ancients, attack speed, crit chance, and then lucky hit chance to restore resource is kind of what I personally prefer, because if you're not killing a bunch of monsters, especially if there's only one target, it helps out a little bit with resource, and the lucky hit chance of Hammer of the Ancients is quite high. Then we're running Tibalt's Will. You just activate it if you need to get resource. You could swap this out if you want to and run more defensive stats, because HOTA hits really hard. The way I built the build is relatively defensive anyways, because again, I'm not scaling so much overpower. I didn't have to waste another like 12 points to go ahead and get the thing where every 12 seconds we get a guaranteed overpower. So I feel like it's pretty okay to run Tibalt's in this variant, but if you want to, you could run another pair of pants that have like armor and then life, you know, all the like bread and butter stuff. And then for our boots, I'm running triple res and movement speed. Now, usually for almost every single one of my builds, I always tell you guys to get resource cost reduction in your boots, or in this case, it'd be fury cost reduction. So with the Ring of the Red Fuhrer, there's actually a very specific breakpoint that you want to meet. So you spend 100 Fury to get some sort of a bonus, right? And then your next hit will guarantee crit. You want to make sure your Fury cost is 50 or higher. If it is 49, that is bad because it requires 2 Hammer of the Ancients to be activated, and then you still need to activate another one. You want your Hammer of the Ancients to cost at least 50 Fury, so getting resource cost reduction in your amulet can be okay, but you need to make sure you watch the amount of resource cost reduction that you're getting in your build. That is very important here, but that's why it's not even here. And with being able to max out all of our resistances, it's just good. There's a thing in the notes, but specifically try not to get fire resistance, because the Ring of the Red Fuhrer will grant you fire res, plus on the Paragon Board we're going to get fire res anyways, so you don't actually want to try to get fire res in your resistances that you're getting. Just if you can get like maybe 1 in your chest piece and then the rest you can get all in the other department. Again, just you don't need fire res. It doesn't matter if you get like lightning res in your chest piece, it just look for triple res and then movement speed for the most part. And then for the aspect in your boots, you can run Slaughter. You can run actually several different ones. There's one that increases your Berserking, but it doesn't seem to activate like continuously, and so I just prefer to reactivate it with Lunging Strike, and I like the playstyle of it. But if you want to, there is one that can give you extra Berserking. I'll go over the actual name over here. But it is also pretty popular. It's Relentless Berserking, Berserker's aspect over here. It gives you a lucky hit with a core skill to extend the duration of Berserking, and it doubles it if it was a crit, so it can be okay, but I felt like it wasn't really necessary anyways, and I'd rather just be able to move a lot faster, especially in town. It's quite nice to have this aspect of Slaughter. There's another one where like you can get additional movement speed after a crit, but I like this one specifically because in town it's really good. But again, there's lots of other suggestions if you want to run something else. And then with the first weapon over here, we're running the aspect of Ancestral Force, so that's for the Hammer of the Ancients. I put this one, it doesn't really matter where you put it though, but I like to put this on my Hammer of the Ancients. In case I want to run another build, I can just swap this piece out, because Hammer of the Ancients hits with your bludgeoning weapon. So ideally what you want to look for is all stats, core damage, strength, and the most important stat, though, for every single piece of gear in the weapon department is damage while berserking. By the way, in this gameplay, I did not have any grandfathers. I did have a Doombringer, so I just went ahead and threw it on so you guys can see the exact same copy of the build. But if you get another sword, just make sure it has damage with berserking, and then the rest of the stats, anything that you can use. That could be close damage, that could be core skill damage, anything that you can use for your characters. Just Doombringer adds a lot more survivability to your build. And then for our other weapon, we're running the accelerating aspect over here, and that will increase your damage with giving you more attack speed. And then pretty much the most important stat again is that damage while berserking in every single weapon here. And then for our other weapon, we are running Limitless Rage, so that gives us additional well, when we get additional fury, we get additional damage. I like to put this one in my two-handed, but if you get another one, it doesn't really matter too much. HOTA isn't really super important for attack speed, past like basically 130-ish, at least getting a 1 or 2 things to have attack speed makes the gameplay feel a little bit better because of the animation after you activate Lunging Strike. But for the most part, this isn't a build where you're going to consistently sit there and hammer again and again. It's more like you hammer once and you move on, and then you hammer once and you move on, and that's kind of the way it plays. So don't worry too much about getting Accelerating Aspect. If you want to run something else that gives you more numerical stats, that's totally fine as well. And then for the first ring, we are going to be running the Unrelenting Fury. I like this one. It helps out against bosses a lot. It gives you a refund of your resource. And then most important stat again, damage while berserking, but getting a maximum life, crit strike chance, resource gen. These are all great stats to upkeep your survivability, as well as getting, again, better consistency with your resource, making the build a lot stronger versus, again, getting, let's say, overpower damage and getting what I consider cosmetic DPS. And then for every single Barbarian build, the Ring of the Red Fuhrer, one of the best items in the entire game, basically. Activate 2 HOTAs, your third one becomes a guaranteed crit, so it's really good for that. And then I'm running Aspect of Disobedience, or if you want to run anything else in the Amulet slot, you can run Banassor's Talisman. I think I was running it at one point in the gameplay, but I ran this build also without Better Swords, and you can see like the damage is still pretty good. Like, well, it doesn't activate on every single hit anyways, but like it doesn't really matter too much with the exception of the bosses. I mean, this is again another Sigil 100, and we are just melting content super, super fast. But yeah, if you want to run Banner Swords, that's totally fine. And then for the gems, we're running the Emerald, Rubies. So I'm not running the Rubies here. Remember, guys, this is the build without overpower. It's not needed. Remember, you only overpower on X amount of seconds. It's much better to get consistent damage versus, again, numerical stats. I know I'm saying this again, but that's the point of this build. It's already good enough for damage. Then we're running Ruby and then Skulls. You do want to put 1 Ruby in one of your pieces of jewelry. It's just for the breakpoint. It's also mentioned in the notes, but Skulls are just going to be overall much better. And then for the Vampiric Powers, we can run Sanguine Brace, we can run Ravenous, Metamorphosis, Hemomancy, and Undying. And going back actually to this gameplay over here, this over here is one thing that I really wanted to go ahead and show off just in the open world once again. With Hemomancy, it just lets you delete content so fast, and this is one reason why I love Hemomancy in the build. Again, it just activates and makes everything vulnerable. You can see that way when I go to actually hit him with the hammer, it just hits them all. And on top of that, Lunging Strike can actually activate Berserking, which will give you a way more damage. So you can see, yeah, it's just fantastic for that reason. And if there's a larger group that's still like kind of like on the way of coming through, then it'll already be vulnerable for your next hit. It just activates and it's just kind of faster. And then we're running Metamorphosis to be able to gain extra resource. This one arguably could be swapped out, but honestly against bosses, if you don't one-shot, this is really helpful with the Tibalt's Pants, so I like it for that reason. Also gives you a little bit more damage. But that said, let's go ahead and now go over the skill tree. So as far as the skill tree goes, with Lunging Strike, we're going to put some points into Lunging Strike. Then we're going to get, of course, Hammer the Ancients. We want it to deal more damage based on the amount of Fury that we have. And then we're going to be getting some extra defenses over here, getting 1 point into each of the shouts. If you have Shaco, you can save the 3 points in all of the shouts. And instead, what you can get is the Booming Voice to make so the effect durations of the shouts are a little bit longer. If you want to put like 1 point into Raid Leader, it's not bad either. Then we're getting Swiftness for extra movement speed. And then we are going to go down and get Aggressive Resistance, more damage reduction while berserking, and on top of that, getting extra Fury Generation. And then we want Hamstring because it makes everything slow. If we get bonus damage to slowed targets or any effects versus slow, which is part of No Mercy over here, this is why I like this so much more. It automatically gives us that +9 crit. The other builds that I have seen rely off of the enemies hitting you, applying thorns, and then you get the bonus damage. Versus this, it's just applied automatically. Some enemies, they just take a while to attack, and I just like this overall much better. And that's why I like running the two-handed sword. Then we're getting Pit Fighter, and then we put 3 points into Thick Skin, Defensive Stance, Counter-Offensive, some more damage, and more damage reduction. And then I'm running Wallop as well as Concussion over here. This is great for survivability. It lets us stun the enemy, and again, we have really high lucky hit chance, so it's almost like a 20, like 22% chance to go ahead and stun enemies. And because the new bosses that come out in the Abittor of Zir are not going to need a stagger bar, this is actually going to be great for that. And then we're running Wall Up, and then we're running Tempered Fury, as well as just 1 point Invigorating. If you want to run Method Heart of Slig, I know that that's another popular thing for the Immortal Barb, but I try not to include like Uber Uniques that are too important in the build. But it can be better, but you would lose out on a lot of damage, as well as movement speed, and that's not something that I'm a fan of losing out on, because efficiency is key. And then just a bunch of points in the Wrath of Berserker, and then we are running Unbridled Rage. Now, another option that you can run if you want to is Unconstrained. This is another great option. It's going to increase the duration of berserking. So there's like the two options that you can go ahead and actually try out yourself and see which one you like. If you really feel like you're having resources problems, Unbridled Rage can be swapped. But again, you do so much damage, you could probably swap that no problem. But I think it's okay the way it is. I mean, look at my resource problem against the targets that are just melting instantly. And again, Tabalt's kind of helps out. But keeping your resource up is also key here. So you would actually kind of, in some situations, get more damage with this, because depending on your resource, you will get bonus damage. But this is so much more damage. It's 135x. It's really hard to compete with, but most of the time this will just outweigh Unconstrained unless you're really starving for resources. Now let's go into the Paragon Board. So starting off in the very first one, we're going to be getting Exploit. This is excellent because it gives us that way to apply vulnerability. Next up, we're going to be getting Blood Rage and Wrath. And then we are going to be getting Carnage with Ire. Ire is the most important stat in the entire game because we get damage while berserking. Now, what is also very important in the first one over here, again, just go to the website. It'll be linked down below. But this is really important to actually hit the Blood Rage. This is what makes everything super good, and this is why I prefer running the two-handed sword. So Blood Rage over here makes it so killing a bleeding enemy has a chance to grant yourself berserking. And this is what gives us all our extra bonus damage. That's why Barbarian is so strong this season. But yeah, we're going to get Wrath in that one, and then we're going to get Ire in this one. And then we are going to get Warbringer in the next one. And on Warbringer, we are actually going to be taking Territorial. And then we're going to go to the right, and then we're going to get Decimator. And you can put in Might. You can put in lots of different options here. There's Crusher. There's a bunch of notes. I think mathematically Might will probably be one of the best choices. And the reason why is it gives you damage and damage reduction. If you want the Overpower, I was playing Crusher. It was literally level 1 in the gameplay. But if you want to, go ahead and play Might. I think that's overall probably the best because it gives you some defenses and some offense because it gives us bonus to all the magic nodes. And some of the magic nodes give us some damage reduction over here. Where is it? Yeah, these give us some damage reduction, and it gets like a huge bonus depending on like how many points you put into the Might or the glyphs level, so to speak. But you also want to get the Decimator node over here, so it just gives us extra damage. It just anytime you make an enemy vulnerable, and this is why I love Hemomancy, it activates everything that procs, gives you the max stacks, and that's basically 10x for just basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like six points. It's definitely worth it, though. Really good stuff indeed. So that is going to be the build for Barbarian for a HOTA build. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed the gameplay as well as the video. If you enjoyed it, drop a like on it. And if you're new here and you want to see the update to this, if there is an update, I'll update you guys via the pinned comment as well as maybe in a future video. But take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.